Hi everyone, welcome back to Version of Events. I'm your host Ellie, and if you're new here, you may want to revisit my earlier episodes including Reanne's story, though I do give a brief explanation of the situation as it stands in this episode. I'd like to start today by saying that this episode deals with serious and distressing subject matter: the death of a young woman and the sentencing of the men found responsible. If you need to step away at any point, please do. Take care of yourselves. So today we are covering the sentencing that took place yesterday at Warwick Crown Court in the case of Reanne Coulson. Let's just recap the verdicts for those who may not know. Mohammed Durnion, formerly Alan Durnion, was found guilty of manslaughter in the death of Reanne Coulson. His associate Adam Moore was found guilty of assisting an offender. Yesterday, Judge Christina Montgomery KC handed down sentences to both men. But before we get into those sentences, let's briefly recap what the court heard about what actually happened to Reanne. The night Reanne died, police had actually attended his flat. He appeared agitated and stressed. He refused to let them in the flat, and officers encouraged him to seek help. And after that, he left the flat entirely. Police then forced entry and found that the flat had no electricity and a bucket was being used as a toilet. West Midlands police have maintained that at that point there was no clear sign of anyone else being in the flat. Durnion then returned to the flat in the early hours of May 22nd after the police had gone. What he did next is deeply disturbing. He placed Reanne's body into a suitcase. He drove her around, looking and scoping out places to dispose of her body, chose Binley wood, dug a shallow grave, poured petrol over her body and set her alight. Her remains then weren't found for 5.5 weeks. During the trial, Durnion admitted to, quote, manhandling Reanne, but offered no explanation for her head and neck injuries. The post-mortem confirmed that those injuries occurred while she was alive. The burn injuries came after her death. He was arrested on June 24th, 2 weeks after Reanne was reported missing. Then on June 27th, after seeing a public plea, an emotional plea from her family, he led police to her grave. Quote, "She's under there," quote, unquote, he said, noting that the grave was, quote, "deep enough," unquote. So, the sentences. Judge Montgomery sentenced Mohammed Durnion to 18 years in prison, describing him as a dangerous offender with a high risk of reoffending. She accepted evidence that Reanne had been strangled, even though the official cause of death was recorded as undetermined. Speaking directly to Durnion in court, the judge did not hold back. She told him he had shown, and I'm quoting here, total contempt for her in life and death. She described how he put Reanne's body in a suitcase, drove around scoping out locations to dispose of her on land or in water, and on the neck injuries, Judge Montgomery said, there were fractures to the structures of her neck. I am satisfied that a hand placed around her neck was the means by which they were sustained. I'm assuming that by the structures of her neck, they are including the hyoid bone, which is commonly broken in strangulations. Those are damning words from the bench. Durnion will serve 2/3 of his 18-year sentence in prison before being released on license. And here is where I have to pause, because the judge herself described him as a significant reoffending risk, and yet release on license after 2/3 of his sentence is the outcome. That tension is really hard to ignore, and I think it's one that Reanne's family will really feel quite acutely. Adam Moore received 6 years for assisting an offender. The judge told Moore directly that he had lied to the police about his involvement in Reanne's burial and lied to the jury during his trial. She noted that he had shown a total lack of conscience, at one point telling officers he wished he had left Reanne's body to rot. Forensic evidence placed him at the burial site. His trainer's sole matched footprints found there. Despite all of that, the lies, the forensic evidence, the callousness, Moore will serve just half of his 6-year sentence in prison before release on license. Now, before I get into the sentences and how I feel about them myself, I just want to add a section here about the defense mitigation, because quite frankly, it disgusted me. Defense barrister David Mason Casey described Durnion as a hardened criminal who had, quote, completely gone off the rails and got himself in a terrible, terrible situation, unquote. Now, if you ask me, a terrible, terrible situation is a car crash, not a murder. He then asked the court to consider that once sober from drugs, Durnion led police to Reanne's burial site and apparently asked them not to tread on her grave. I'm going to be direct here. That is scraping the bottom of an empty barrel. We are talking about a man who actually has 14 prior convictions, including assault and battery, who has, in my view, in my opinion, don't come for me, murdered a woman, does not deserve credit or sympathy for eventually doing the bare fucking minimum. Yes, defense lawyers are necessary. Yes, everyone's entitled to a proper and active defense, and I respect that wholly. But framing the act of leading police to Reanne's body as though it speaks to some redeeming quality in this man, as though the next line out of his mouth might be, "He's a good person, really," is where I take exception. Mohammed Durnion and Adam Moore are not good people. They are convicted criminals whose actions were calculated, cruel, and deeply dehumanizing to Reanne, both in her death and what was done to her body afterwards. In my view, Durnion deserved life in prison, and neither man should be serving any part of their sentence on license. But with that all said, I want to bring it back to Reanne's family. At the sentencing, Reanne's family were offered the chance to read out or have read out for them victim impact statements. And Reanne's mother, Lynne Sparkes, and her twin sister, Kirsten Coulson, gave victim impact statements. And I want to make sure that their words are heard. Lynne's statement was read by the prosecution. She described Reanne as a beautiful, caring, loving person whose infectious laugh could light up any room. She said that Reanne had a heart of gold and was always willing to help anyone in need. And then these words came. The pain of losing my daughter in such a violent way is something I carry in every moment. Kirsten, Reanne's twin, spoke in court herself. She described being left with an overwhelming sense of emptiness. She said, "I'm still trying to comprehend a world where my twin no longer exists." She spoke about how taking part in media appeals to find Reanne was one of the hardest things she's ever had to do. And she said something that I think captures the unique grief of losing a twin. Being a twin is more than a family relationship. It is a shared existence. That line stays with me. A shared existence. And one half of it was taken in the most violent and callous of circumstances. Both sentences may be viewed as lenient given the gravity of what was done to Reanne. And it's worth noting that Reanne's family do have the option to appeal should they wish to challenge the level of leniency or the terms of the license release. Whether they choose to pursue that path is entirely their decision, and whatever they decide, they deserve our support. Reanne Coulson, she deserved better than what happened to her, and better than the sentences handed down yesterday. Her mother, her twin sister, and the whole family carry that loss every single day. The least we can do is make sure that her name is remembered and her story is told honestly. That's it for today's episode. Thank you for listening. If this case has affected you, please do reach out to someone that you trust, and I will put the numbers for UK support lines in the show notes as well. It's that awkward moment where after all of that, I ask you to please follow, subscribe, find us on social media. We're under at Version of Events everywhere you can think of, apart from YouTube, where we are Version of Events, the pod. If you can review us, please do. And if you can give us a 5-star rating, then I will love you forever. So, with that said, let's finish today's episode remembering her name, Reanne Coulson.